Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and a Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. And we come into the show on the back of a tremendous win for Newcastle United over at Tottenham Hotspur, 4-0. I still can't quite believe they managed to dismantle Spurs in such a fashion. Aaron, how you doing? You keeping well? Just can you actually believe what Newcastle managed to do?
No, I think it's just about sunk in. But I think when I was walking home Saturday night, I was still in that feeling of what on earth have we just witnessed? And certainly, when myself and our colleague John Gibson were poring over the team sheet an hour before kickoff, we weren't confident. Let's just say that there was a few eyebrows raised and questions asked about what on earth Newcastle were going to do with that back four against the Spurs team, which know exactly how to find the back of the net. Fast forward 2 hours later, and it didn't matter.
It didn't. They were absolutely superb at Newcastle. And I have to admit, I was not confident coming into this game. I would have taken a point beforehand. I predicted goals, but I predicted goals for both sides. And in no way did I think Newcastle United would go anywhere near to replicating what they did last season when they thumped Tottenham 6-1. Before we get into that, we're going to talk about, Aaron, a little bit of success of our own, because we have been nominated for Best Sport Podcast of the Year at the Publisher Podcast Awards, and Best Video Strategy as well. First time we've spoken about it on camera. Aaron's hoping to get on the ticket down with me to the awards in June, aren't you?
Yeah, look, I'm going to be on my best behaviour between now and June. I'm going to stop slagging you off behind your back just to make sure that I'm your plus one of the night. And I think you've been a little bit modest there because you've left out an award that you've been nominated for as well, personally.
Yes, Podcast Hero of the Year, but it's not all about me. This is a team effort, a team game. And if we pick up the trophy like we did last year, it will be a win for the team. And I've been joking with our Villa counterpart who was also up for the same Best Sport Podcast Award, that we've beaten Villa twice this season. So why not make it 3 wins on the bounce? But yes, over the moon with that. And as I said on a couple of episodes last week, thank you to you guys watching and listening for your support, because without you guys, we would have an audience to put out the content to, and so it's for you guys as well as it is for us. But back to that game against Tottenham then. I mean, we there's a lot to talk about on the pitch, off the pitch, but I think we're going to have to start, Aaron. Well, it was on the pitch, but it was nothing to do with the football, and that is the tremendous work by Seller to give up their shirt sponsor for the day, and give it over to the RNID, the deafness charity, which is absolutely brilliant. The Royal National Institute for Deaf People, and we had deaf fans coming on the pitches of the mascots and wearing special shirts which allowed them to feel the noise and atmosphere, and you could see on their faces just how much it meant to them. And then you had Dan Burn, after the first goal that Newcastle scored, signing to them, because he learned it during the week. He promised he would do it, and he kept his promise. And there's a wonderful clip going round of a young Newcastle United fan, and she just cannot quite believe that Dan Burn has followed through on his promise. And if you haven't seen the clip, I advise you go and see it. It'll be on the club's socials. It will make your day. What a tremendous gesture by the club, a tremendous gesture by Salah, and brilliant from Dan Burn to do what he did after that first goal.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic from Seller, it must be said. We spoke to some guys from Seller a couple of months ago, and they sort of hinted that something big was in the pipeline, and they couldn't tell us what. But I think, there's been a lot of sort of controversy from outside about Seller, and, obviously they're closest to Saudi Arabia, but the fact that they've done such a fantastic gesture for Saturday's game was amazing. And I think it added to Saturday's game. I think the fact that Newcastle won 4-0 was brilliant. But also they got that spot on with the tone that added to the day. I think the War Flags display was absolutely fantastic as well. Obviously, the nod to the Geordie contingent. All in all, it just made for an incredible afternoon. And I've got a tweet here by a West Ham fan, funny enough, that I stumbled across on Twitter after the game. And she wrote, "As a deaf person, I was extremely, extremely emotional watching the Newcastle game earlier. What Newcastle did for those little kids, what they have made possible for all deaf and hard of hearing people, is something that needs to be championed. Thank you, Newcastle, for making this possible." And I think, none of us could maybe have put it better than that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's just another kind of thing to showcase what the club do within the community. Obviously, you've got the Newcastle United Foundation, which helps disadvantaged children and young adults through various kind of programs, which is brilliant. But at the club as well, on match days, you've got the sensory room and other programs that go along to help those who don't maybe feel comfortable or can't enjoy a normal match day experience like you or I or most of our listeners would be able to do so. And it just reaffirms that despite the wealth of the club, and you're talking multi-million pounds, if not close to billions of pounds when it comes to everything added up, the community is still at the heart of it, despite Champions League adventures, despite battling at the right end of the table, despite millions of pounds being spent on players and the hundreds of thousands of pounds a week on their wages. These players, they do care about the fans, they do care about the local community, and Dan Burn obviously being one of those from the local community just reaffirmed again just how close to the heart the fan base is to the club.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I think over the last couple of weeks, especially, we've seen some really good strides made by the club. Obviously, as you've touched on there, Dan Burn going to visit them this week. You had Bruno and Anthony Gordon just a couple of weeks ago, introducing themselves and spending a bit of time with a fan in that sensory room that you just mentioned. And as you say, the TNT sports cameras thankfully picked up the footage of that girl celebrating in the crowd, which was absolutely fantastic. It's what it's all about. So yeah, really, really good initiative, and I'm glad that it came off the way it did.
Yeah, and like you say, you kind of set the tone, didn't it, with the display as well for more flags honouring the Geordie contingent within the squad, and it just felt like a perfect afternoon. And obviously, the result allows us to say that, the performance allows us to say that, but when you look back, everything was there, and Spurs were just tactically outclassed. It was an absolute masterclass from Eddie Howe and his staff, and Newcastle United were absolutely superb from the word go. And we're going to have to start, Aaron, with the tactical masterclass from Eddie Howe and his team, because I didn't see it coming. I think Eddie Howe has been guilty at times of setting up not in the right way. We saw against Chelsea, for instance, away, he set up in a way that no one could quite understand why he did it. Whereas against Tottenham, you could tell they've done their homework properly. They spent a lot of hours tweaking everything to make sure that they got every little bit out of the setup that they could. And Spurs, as I said, right from the off, just did not know how to get the better of Newcastle, whereas Newcastle knew from the first minute how to stop Spurs being potent in attack and then how to actually be clinical in front of goal themselves.
Yeah, look, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is a Tottenham team that, came to St James's Park, not shy of putting the ball in the back of the net. And I think pre-game, when you looked at that back four and a back four that's never played together this season, a lot of players sort of out of position, and you look at the attacking players that Tottenham had on display, a lot of people would have been expecting goals, but probably Dubravka picking them out and not the other way around. As you say, I think they got it spot on. I think you could tell there was times very, very early on where they were dropping to 5 at the back, and Elliot Anderson, of all players, was having to fill in this brand new makeshift left wing back role, which he's probably never had to do before in his life. And there's actually a great article being done this morning by our friend at The Athletic, Chris Woff, who sort of detailed how Newcastle have had to go through the last 4 games, picking up 10 points with systems that they've probably never played this season. I mean, if someone had told you, at the start of this season would be at this stage playing Jacob Murphy, Emil Kraft, Fabian Schär and Dan Burn as a starting back four and getting 4 goals, a clean sheet and 3 points, I don't think many people would have believed you. So they got it spot on. And Eddie Howe, when he was speaking to us at the end of the game, said we've had ridiculously small amount of numbers actually available to train this week. So the fact that they've had such a threadbare squad, you've had players like Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento who have been instrumental the last couple of weeks and they couldn't even train. It just adds to that win. It makes it even sweeter that they've, had all that against them, stacked in their favour or against their favour, and they've came out and delivered not just a win, but such a dominant performance as well.
Yeah, I read that piece actually from Chris, and I wish you hadn't name dropped it now because his ego will be through the roof. And now we've described it as a great article, and it was a great article. But you are right about the way that they set up, and you've mentioned there Elliot Anderson. That's where I really want to focus on. We'll talk about how good he was going forward and the impact that he's had. And as I did a video on YouTube yesterday, the misfortune I think he's had, Newcastle have had, not being able to use more of him this season because of that injury. But I really want to start with the fact that he had 2 positions against Tottenham as a number 8, and then drawn in at left wing back when Newcastle were defending in their own half. Now, you look at Elliot Anderson, and there's no way he can be match fit, not after coming back from such a long-term injury, but he had to put in such a shift on Saturday to make sure he could play both those roles when called upon, and he did it absolutely brilliantly. And the fact that he had the effort to get up and down the pitch really does excite me for the future. But first off, what did you make of the fact he was kind of playing a hybrid role, like I say, number 8, and then into left wing back when called upon?
Yeah, obviously, when the teams came out, I wasn't too sure whether it was a bit of a decoy, and actually it was going to be Kraft right back and Jacob Murphy left back, which wouldn't have been ideal, but you could sort of understand it given how Dan Burns played. And there was actually a point of the warm up where Jacob Murphy looked like he was going to line up on the left. Now, very early in the game, you saw whenever Newcastle didn't have the possession, they would go to 3 at the back, and they would have Murphy and Anderson essentially as wing backs. And I thought, okay, it's bold. You're asking Elliot Anderson to stop one of the most deadly strikers in human son. You've got to, if anybody's going to have to be on the game, it's whoever's marking him. But it was just effortless. And Eddie Howe rightly singled him out for praise 1 or 2 times after the game because of that hybrid role he did. There was a question asked as well of Howe in the presser, and said, is he the closest player you've got to Joelinton? Now, Eddie Howe played that down, but I can see why the question was asked, because he was playing that number 8 role when he was really, for such a small lad who, yes, he's bulked out, but he's by no means Joelinton's stature. But he's in every single tackle. He's tenacious. He's combative. He's fearless without the ball, and with it, he really doesn't give these players a minute to settle. And I think what we've seen the last couple of weeks when he's came back into the team and he's slowly getting back up to full fitness, he's a really good asset in that midfield for filling in and what Joelinton was so good at. And at times, and it's probably a comparison that people might not agree with, but I think if you go back to last season and Sean Longstaff was that man in midfield who would just cover every blade of grass. I think we saw that from Elliot Anderson on Saturday. I think he was the one who was covering the most distance. The only sort of gripe I've got with him is that, I think for him to really hold down a place in this team, he needs to add goals, he needs to add assists, he needs to just be a little bit more clinical in the final third. He had a good chance in the second half when Newcastle were piling on the pressure, but apart from that, I can't really fault him. And I think hopefully now, touchwood, injury-free, nice run of games to end the season, and hopefully next year is the one where he kicks on, just like Gordon has this year.
I thought it was absolutely superb. And if you watch a few of the chances and a couple of the goals, it's his interception that then sets the ball free for Bruno, long ball over the top for Isak second. And it's all about what Elliot Anderson does in the moments leading up to that pass. He just never allowed the man in front of him any time, any space whatsoever. Like you say, good at getting the foot in, but then always wanting just to drive the ball forward, and you don't often get that from players, I don't think, where usually their strength is either one or the other, but he is so good at winning the ball back and then carrying the ball forward and helping Newcastle go on the attack. I was so impressed with him, and I can't wait until he's match fit. I don't care what anyone says; he won't be match fit. So just imagine him with a full tank. It's going to be he's going to be a force to reckon with. I do agree he needs to add more goals, but I think in time that will come. He created that chance really out of nothing. The one that the keeper had to push behind, but yeah, tremendous to see him, and it's a lesson as well, I think, for the likes of Lewis Miley, even maybe Lewis Hall, to a degree, that once this season ends, you're not going to go and book a holiday to the Maldives and spend 3 weeks on a beach, or you might do, but you're going to be in the gym, or you're really in a ridiculously expensive hotel for 3 or 4 hours before everyone gets their breakfast, and you're going to bulk up and you're going to work your backside off to make sure you're ready for pre-season, because that's what Elliot Anderson had to do last summer, and he did that, and he came back a different player. He set the pre-season alight really over in America. So for the younger lads in and around the side, the Ben Parkinsons, the Lewis Smileys, I think what Elliot Anderson's done this season, what he did last pre-season before they went to the US, that's what they've got to look at, and they've got to say, look, if I want to be up there with Elliot Anderson and I want to be in and around the first team, I know Lewis Miley's done that, but this is what Lewis Miley now needs to do to have a real shout of being in that first team when everyone is fit, is just follow the path of Elliot Anderson.
Yeah, 100%. And you've hit the nail on the head there. Last summer, everyone was talking about, how this was going to be his season shining. His pre-season was so good. You expected such big things. We were obviously right about Gordon, but we were also putting Elliot Anderson in that bracket of, they've decided to keep him at the club, good, give him game time and he'll flourish. And I think even though we've only seen him in sort of fits and starts of the season, you can tell that he's definitely improving. Even though he hasn't been playing, he's definitely getting bigger, he's definitely getting stronger, he's quicker. And everybody keeps talking about, what could have been this season if it wasn't for the injuries. Where could Newcastle be? I think just on a personal level, where would he be right now if he'd had a run of games like Lewis Miley has or Sean Longstaff has? So look, next season, if he carries on the way he's going, it's really, really exciting for him. And also, just on that, it's that cliche, but it could save Newcastle United a lot of money. Everybody's talking about them needing an attacking midfielder who can unlock defences, and it's quite fitting that we saw James Maddison, really struggle on Saturday. Newcastle will link with them heavily, but if Elliot Anderson starts to add goals and starts to add assists and can play that hybrid role, whether he's playing an 8 or a 10 or a 6, then Newcastle, it's one less problem for them to solve in the transfer market.
It certainly is, and it's going to be another big summer for him and the likes of Lewis Miley. And you and I discussed the future of Lewis Miley and maybe whether a loan deal would be the best thing to do next season. And again, that is kind of following the path of Elliot Anderson. Of course, he went to Bristol and he absolutely excelled there, and then he's come back and impressed in the current Newcastle United first team. A few comments. We got Ricky saying, I thought the formation was 3-4-3. Maybe wrong. It was kind of 3 at the back, and then when Spurs were in Newcastle's half, it dropped into a 5, which is the perfect game plan. We've got Graham saying, does this mean for all those having a go at Eddie, saying he has no plan B, as it proved that he has? Yeah, and I think, look, Eddie Howe probably the first to admit he's had to really maybe move out of his comfort zone to a certain degree in recent weeks and months because of the results, the likes of West Ham, for example, and against Spurs. These results have really mattered in terms of what Newcastle can achieve. You come to the business end of the season, and I think he's probably maybe even a bit reluctantly had to kind of go to formations where he's not maybe 100% comfortable setting his team up with, but it has worked. So yes, he's got a plan B. I think it's probably shown that he's always learning and he's always adapting, is Eddie Howe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what we've seen certainly in the last 2 months is that they're working out how to win some games. I think that game on Saturday has a lot of similarities to the one they won at Wolves, where they just sort of said to Wolves, you can attack if you want, but when we get the ball, we're going to really punish you. And Gary makes a comment here in the comments saying, what surprised me most after the game was the 27% possession stat, because we looked in total control. Now, when we were waiting for Eddie Howe and a very angry Ange Postecoglou to come out and speak to us after the game, somebody in the press room mentioned that stat, and I thought, hang on, that can't be right. There's no way Newcastle United have only had 27% possession that game, because it certainly didn't feel like it. But look, it was right, and it just goes to show you how clinical they were on the day.
I was even more surprised at the fact that I think it was 123 accurate passes, was it? The final stat, I've got it written down somewhere. My mind was blown at how many accurate passes they had. I'm sure it was 123 accurate passes alongside their 27% possession, which it actually blows your mind that they managed to score 4 goals against the Champions League chasing Tottenham Hotspur with such little possession and so few passes. And yet, it didn't seem that way. It didn't seem like they had such little of the ball, but they were just clinical. And, the setup from Eddie Howe was very risk and reward. And he would have said, for this to work, you're going to have to take your chances. And they took pretty much every chance they had. I mean, it could have been 7 or 8, truth be told, but we'll not complain at just scoring 4. But we've said in recent weeks, the one thing that's been missing, we said against Everton in particular, was that clinical touch from Newcastle, and they had it in abundance against Tottenham.
Yeah, one of our colleagues messaged me at half time and said, we should be out of sight here. It should be 5 or 6-0. And there was just that little fear in the back of your head that maybe Tottenham would come out second half, all guns blazing, and Newcastle would maybe be punished for missing some big chances in the first half, because, there was a lot of efforts that they could have finished. Thankfully, they didn't take the foot off the gas. Thankfully, also, can we just say, that was one of the most abject Tottenham performances we've ever seen. I mean, Newcastle were fantastic and brilliant and dominant, and they deserved it. But my God, that Tottenham team looks in real trouble. And I think people were, saying they were going to be league contenders earlier this season seems a very long time ago. But look, Newcastle kept going. Even at 3-0, you thought they were going to score more. Tottenham just could not get a real grip of the game, or at least going forward, despite that, 70% possession. And as we've said, Newcastle have found this way at home where, Dan Burn was speaking before the game to Rio Ferdinand, and he says, whoever comes to St James's Park, we'll give them a right go and we'll go at them. But actually, Newcastle learning how to, let the other team have the ball. It doesn't have to be 100 miles an hour and going forward all the time. They're really, really good at those transitions now. They're good at soaking up, pressure and then exploding on the break. We saw it with Isak's second goal. That one ball over the top takes 2 or 3 players out the game, and it's 3-0. So they're finding ways to win against big opposition despite not having much of the ball.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Spurs lacked fight right from the start, and I wasn't worried going in at half time with the goal, the scoreline just 2-0. I've been worried in previous games where you think, oh my goodness me, they haven't taken all the chances. XYZ is definitely going to get back in here. But I didn't look at Spurs and think, yeah, I'm worried, because I just wasn't. You could see from the likes of Madison in particular, the arms, flailing on the hips. They just didn't look comfortable in the arena they were playing. They didn't look up for the fight, and whatever Eddie Howard said to them before, and all the elements we've mentioned with the change in sponsor, the young mascots, the flag display, it just seemed like everything was going in Newcastle United's favour. And you're funny you should mention there the text at half time. I didn't actually get a text from you half time this time around. So does that just prove the only time you text me on match days at half time is when things are going sour?
Well, I was a very busy man on Saturday, as you'll have been aware, as you were hobnobbing it up in the director's box. So some of us were actually working.
I work very hard on match days. Thank you very much. But we talk about how much possession Spurs had and what people thought of them. But for as bad as Spurs were, and you've mentioned that Newcastle were excellent, the reason they couldn't make the most of their possession is because Newcastle closed off every single avenue that they would be able to get up the pitch. So we've mentioned there the way Elliot Anderson and Jacob Murphy drop back into a 5 when defending in their own half. And then you have Isak dropping deep and man-marking Bazuma, and allowing Gordon and Harvey Barnes to push on and force mistakes from the defence. With Isak dropping back, that meant the central route was a no-go. And the man-marking across the entire pitch made it very difficult for Spurs to play the way they like at all. And it just goes to show how much research Eddie Howe really must have done in the days building up to this game.
Yeah, it really started from the front. I thought the pressing from Isak and Gordon and Barnes was fantastic all the way through the game. It didn't give Tottenham's defence a second to think, and obviously that's how we saw Gordon get his first and Newcastle's second. I think.
On that, do you because when I was watching the game, and I don't know if I haven't seen what it says, so maybe I'm wrong on this, but it looked like to me they weren't pressing high as we've gone to know Newcastle do last season, for instance, when they were right into the box and really pressing. It looked like to me Eddie Howard said to them, just allow them to come out just a little bit, to the edge of the box a little bit further, and then start pressing, because it looked like Spurs, as soon as they got it out of their own box, that's when they got nervous. And I know you're talking a matter of yards, you're not talking a big distance, but I actually do think that made the difference, because Spurs, as they carried out, thought, we've got a bit of time here. But then when no one pressed them, they thought, well, I'm not really too sure what I'm going to do here, because the way they're at their best, Spurs, is when they get pressed and then they pass it around you and they break up the pitch. But it did feel like to me, Eddie Howe just said, let them come out a little bit, give them a false sense of security, and then you hit them, and then you chuck in the man mark and etc. I don't know. That's what I took from it. It was just perfectly executed. But yeah, sorry, go on.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think there was a couple of times in that first half where Tottenham were very keen to go back to Vicario, who's usually very, very good with his feet. And he just looked all over the shop because he knew he'd had Isak, breathing down his neck, or Gordon racing towards him. And I thought that front three, which again we haven't seen too often this season, was absolutely brilliant. I think it begs the question of, what do you do now going forward? I think Jacob Murphy, obviously, if he does go back to right midfield, might have a tough task getting back in that team, because I actually think Gordon was really, really good on the right. And I think if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, I think I'd say, no, keep him on the left. That's where he's been the best. But he slotted into that role as if he's played there all season. Barnes looks like with each game he's getting fitter. He's stripping a lot fitter. He looks a lot more confident. He was very, very, very positive with his play on Saturday. I thought he was giving Porro nightmares down that Tottenham right hand side. And then I think if you just go to the other end of the pitch, we've talked a lot about the back four, but Fabian Schär again, just colossal. Dan Burn, even though he's back at left back, I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I think everybody on that pitch, and I think even players we haven't mentioned like Dubravka and Kraft and Sean Longstaff, all really played their part. I don't think you can really look at any of those 11 and think they didn't do a really good job on Saturday.
It was a proper team performance, wasn't it? And I think for me, Emil Kraft deserves so much praise. I thought he was absolutely excellent. He's just no nonsense defender. Mm-hmm. Is he a world-class defender? No. Is he Sven Botman, Fabian Schär level? Arguably not at all. But what he does is he does what is necessary. He doesn't do anything clever. The ball needs to go into touch. That's where it'll go. But he's comfortable on the ball. Okay, he's not the fastest, but he can get in with a sliding challenge. I love him. And I know people kicked off when he got the contract. And I was banging on about it for months, and it finally happened. I know you have said a few little jokes to me off camera about my love for Emil Kraft, but I thought he was absolutely superb. And I really do think a performance like that against Spurs will have quietened some doubt as to why Newcastle extended his contract. Is he going to be first team when everyone's fit? No, because they're likely to go and buy another defender as well in the summer. But what a backup to have. He's an international cap defender. He's a very, very good defender, a very good Premier League defender. And he put in a solid 9 out of 10 performance, I felt, on Saturday. And I was so pleased to see it against a very good side on paper as well.
I think personally for him, we've seen this season more than most how quickly the tide can turn on a player from the fans. And I think when he dropped that performance as he did at West Ham, there was a lot of people thinking, what on earth have you done keeping this on? It was a really poor performance. And for him to come back into the team after that, play the way he did on Saturday, hardly put a foot wrong, if at all. Testament to him, testament to his character, and look, he was absolutely spot on.
He was, and there was a few challenges very early on from a few players, one from him, Sean Longstaff, Dan Burn, good old sliding challenges, and I think that kind of boosted their confidence going into the rest of the game. But yeah, very impressed by Emil Kraft. And I just think those who were on his back just need to show him a little bit more respect, because at the end of the day, Eddie Howe thinks he's worth keeping on, and that should be good enough for everybody, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, he's only played a handful of times this season, and more often than not, he's been very positive. He was very positive on Saturday. He also had a very good game. I can't remember for the life of us who it was against it. St James's Park a couple of months back. It was just that West Ham performance where he came on and came off again in the second half, which was a little blip on his resume. But apart from that, solid as a rock. And as you say, Eddie Howe clearly sees something to keep him at the club beyond the summer.
Now, before we start talking a bit more in depth about the 4 goals Newcastle United scored, Spurs had their chances to rectify the danger that was coming, because Newcastle's first chance comes from winning the ball near their own box. It's a ball played into Gordon down the right, who breaks, crosses to I think it's Barnes, and then it goes out for a corner. And that was kind of what was to come down the line. It was a sign of things to come, and I was a little bit surprised Spurs didn't click about how Newcastle were going to attack them, because if you're looking at that, surely you think, okay, that's definitely a sign of things to come in, and they just didn't change. They just didn't adapt to what was in front of them.
Yeah, it was a very, very strange performance, and I think undoubtedly there was a very poor day for them all individually. I mean, Heung-min Son, you hardly knew was on the pitch. Basuma, I didn't realise was on the pitch until he got a yellow card in the second half. James Maddison was huffing and puffing, but couldn't make things happen. And for all I love Timo Werner, I would have taken him at Newcastle. He had a very, very poor performance. And again, those risks that come attached for him in terms of his finishing. He reminds me a little bit of Darwin Núñez, always in the right position, but struggles to put the ball in the back of the net. Now, saying that, I also thought collectively it was a very poor Spurs performance, and the amount of times Ange was stood on the touchline huffing and puffing because his players had either lost the ball or were too slow to get to it when Newcastle were getting ahead of them. He was really frustrated. But as you say, there was no real system change. There was no change in the way they played. They wouldn't say, okay, we'll let Newcastle have the ball and we'll do a bit of defending and counter-attacking. There was none of that. And credit to Newcastle, as we've said, for stifling them and making it hard for them to play. But I mean, if this is a Spurs team that have got ambitions of being a Champions League club, then I think they really need to have a long look, because I just think they looked anything but that on Saturday.
I do wonder if maybe
you are obviously, closing on them. I know we were talking this morning off camera. It is probably too late for a Champions League push, but
of course it's too late.
Probably,
of course it's too late. Nah, never in a million years. I will. I'll run down Northumberland Street in a red and white shirt if Newcastle get the Champions League this season. But yeah, I mean, coming into the game, there was a lot of talk about this really having to be a must-win for Tottenham because of their running. They've got a horrendous run into the end of the season. I think it's Man City, Arsenal, and is it another big side? Is it Liverpool potentially? And they've definitely got
Chelsea as well.
Yeah, they've got a horrendous run in. I know there was a lot of talk about this being one they have to win. So I wonder that pressure got to them, knowing they're running to come. The first goal came from Alexander Isak. Down the right-hand side, Gordon fighting off with Doggy, putting the ball across to Isak, who then sent Mickey van der Ven flying and then just pops it into the back of the net. But it comes from Newcastle kind of absorbing the pressure, Bruno releasing Gordon down the right, Gordon just wanting it more than Doggy fighting him off, and Doggy on the floor holding his hands up, appealing for a free kick. Never in a month of Sundays was that a free kick. Then Gordon just picking the pass, and Isak just sort of silky to watch. He's just brilliant. Turns into the right, and I mean, poor Mickey van der Ven. I mean, he's been Spurs' best player probably this season. He's been a fantastic signing, but he had an absolute nightmare of a day. Not many teams have done that to him. It was a wonderful opening goal by Newcastle United.
The only person who had a worse Saturday afternoon than Mickey van der Ven was the Spurs fan who tweeted at 10 o'clock in the morning, Ange could play 9 players today, and as long as Mickey van der Ven's one of them, we'll win the game. So
fantastic.
There might have been some crafty deletes from him. Just on the topic of Alexander Isak, there's two points I'd like to raise with you, and it's points that you've raised on other podcasts. One, are you ready to change your mind that he's not clinical enough? And two, are you ready to change your mind that 80 million would be enough to get him away from Newcastle United? Because I feel like, I know you've got to swallow your pride and admit that you were maybe a bit wrong on 1 or 2 episodes ago, but I think it's better to do it now and get it out of the way, because I will keep bringing it up every episode until you change your mind.
That's fine. Just like I keep bringing up the third striker issue that you saw or against, and just like I could bring up Calvin Phillips as well, but we'll not go down that route, Aaron.
What I will say, I'm hearing.
And I know what I will say is, because there was a comment from someone that I was saving, and they said Isak could have had 4, 5, or 6, which kind of goes towards the point that I was making about this clinicalness. Look, I don't overstate the point that I was making. That the point about him not being clinical enough was when he's in the box and he's at close range and it's a cross that flashes across him, he doesn't put enough away. I still stick by that. He scores fantastic goals. Of course, he's a clinical striker. He's got 21 goals this season. That is the definition of being clinical. But he still should have probably 27, 28. And look, strikers are there to miss. You've got to miss to score, as the old say. They're paid to miss in many ways because it'll just make them more hungry to score the next effort. I still stand by the point, though, in around the 6-yard box, especially when the ball's put into him from the wide. I do think he essentially, I think he misses the easier chances. That's the point I'm making. And it comes out from a place of love, because I want him to have 28, 30 goals. But don't get me wrong. Look, he's absolutely fantastic. Another 2 to his belt. And I can't argue with the fact that he is a clinical striker. I just say he could have a little bit more, but I'm not going to be greedy. And on the 80 million point, there must have been some context to that. I don't know. Was it just being too realistic? Was it understating his value? I mean, look, he's absolutely brilliant, and you wouldn't want to sell him for less than 120 million pounds. But it's just, I don't know. I mean, I would say 80 million is probably a starting bid potentially for any suitors.
Well,
I don't think the question was how much.
Than I thought you were going to give. I thought you'd just come out and do good old Tory MP tactic of deflect. But look, on Isak, I get your point, and Eddie Howe does want him to score more dirty goals and the ugly goals, as they're called, the tap-ins. But and I will admit, when I was sat there and Newcastle were 2-0 up and Isak missed a couple of chances, I did have a little bit of sweat on my brow, thinking Andrew's just going to be sat up above us and he's just going to be notching them down on his little pad and pen. But then when he scored the second goal, I thought that's given me enough ammunition to bring the point up. For anybody who hasn't seen it, somebody, a Newcastle fan, has put together all 19 of Alexander, or all 17, sorry, of Alexander Isak's Premier League goals on Twitter today. And it's a very delightful 3-minute watch. Honestly, some of the goals he scores, honestly, I think 120 million again is still doing him a disservice. He is the most important player to Newcastle United. And as somebody's rightly pointed out here in the comments, if Moises Caicedo is costing 150 million and if Enzo Fernandez is costing 150 million, how much is Alexander Isak worth? I don't think it's not even worth considering until you double that.
There we go. I do hope you're leading the negotiations, and if you could be leading them on Dan Ashworth as well, we could be in for a bumper summer. Jake says 150 million there. The Mighty Win says Isak could have had a hat-trick before he scored, but to be frank, Andy Cole was the same. He gets into those positions, which is what makes him so dangerous. Baz Down Under says, I agree with that, Andrew, about Isak in the box. So I'm not alone, I don't think, Aaron. And so maybe you've done my viewpoint a disservice. But a tremendous afternoon from Alexander Isak. And we'll talk about the third goal in a moment because it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we've talked about Mickey van der Ven ended up on his backside. If you haven't seen the picture, go and see it. Go and see it. I mean, get that printed off and hang it in the Louvre. Unbelievable. Poor Mickey van der Ven. The second goal comes from a mistake from Porro. Anthony Gordon seizes it into the box again, twists and turns. Is it Mickey van der Ven that ends up on the floor again?
It is, yeah, unfortunately.
Oh my God! If he's collecting lightly points for ending up on the floor, he'll have a free one.
Somebody's rightly pointed out that for the third goal, Isak gets put in on top, and Mickey van der Ven really should slide in and try and block the shot, but I think he's got PTSD from the first two, and he sides against it, and Isak scores. It was, as you say, he's been fantastic. He's been a fantastic signing for Tottenham. But I tell you what, he had an absolute horror 120 seconds in that first half, didn't he?
He certainly did. But a tremendous finish from Anthony Gordon. The keeper gets a hand to it and maybe should do a little bit better with it. But it's just power, isn't it? And what is really nice is that when you have players into these positions, you're feeling confident that they're going to score. And I know what I've just said about Alexander Isak, and someone will undoubtedly comment, oh, look, you're changing your way again. But I think the majority of people do feel very confident when Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes are bearing down at the box that the ball's going to end up in the back of the net if an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, and look, that's why I completely get your point about Isak and the chances that he's missed in the last couple of months. But I think, as you say, he's scoring so many goals and he's taken so many of the harder chances. You sort of can accept the misses a bit more. If he wasn't scoring either, then there'd be a problem. But as you say, when he got in that position and he was running at Van der Ven, just like when he was running at Branthwaite at Everton last week, or when he's running at West Ham's defence the week before, you're confident he's going to score. And it's the exact same with Anthony Gordon. When he gets in those positions, just on the inside channel, and he's running towards goal, you got that feeling now that they're two players that are just going to score. And it was the same with Gordon. Fantastic finish. Another really good showing from him. I know we haven't really mentioned him, but I thought he was absolutely fantastic on the right-hand side.
Two assists, one goal. Gareth Southgate in the director's box watching him. And I mean, look, I think he's probably already on the plane, but he's making a very big case to be in that starting 11, isn't he?
Be a real shock if he wasn't. And as you say, I think, at the minute, you probably wouldn't bet against him being very much involved in the Euros, not just sort of making up the numbers. A lot of people have mentioned on social media, I think we've even had someone in the comments so far saying about his dead ball set pieces, better than Trippier. Should he be put on them full time? That corner was obviously pinpoint for Fabian Schär for the fourth goal. Just a fantastic achievement again. And look, it's beginning. I don't think we would have been saying this a couple of months ago, but it's beginning to be a little bit of a crowded field for Player of the Season. Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, Fabian Schär to probably be the top three, but I think Gordon's got a real shout of winning it.
Yeah, I mean, Fabian Schär has been brilliant, but I'd say Anthony Gordon's probably carried Newcastle through those dark days of kind of November to February sort of time. So he would get my vote, and he's continuing to finish the season with goals, which is really important. The third goal, briefly mentioned it there, Alexander Isak, but what a pass from Bruno Guimaraes. I mean, again, though, Elliot Anderson actually wins that ball, and that falls to Bruno, who just unbelievable pass over the top. And what I loved about both Isak's goals is how he holds his run in different ways, different styles, but what he does with his run to ensure he stops on side. If you watch for the first goal, he bends his run kind of around the defender, but away from him to ensure he stops on side. The second goal, he just moves a little bit to his left. So when the ball goes over the shoulder of the defender, he's ready to pivot. And as soon as he moves to the left, he's going to draw back on his right and sprint away. And that's exactly what he did. And Mickey Van de Ven just couldn't read it, which was a little bit strange given, again, how good he's been. But superb from Isak, wonderful ball over the top, great first touch. And then he's into the box, and a fantastic finish from Isak. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, very good. I think it just goes to show, I mean, Van de Ven's no slouch. He's a very, very quick defender, and he just could not keep up with Isak. I think, again, the defending was a little bit suspect from him, but he probably was, as we said, scored from the first half. But yeah, Isak, very good finish. I sort of breathed a sigh of relief, one, because obviously Newcastle had that 3-goal advantage, but also because I couldn't take Isak missing another chance because I knew you'd be rubbing it in my face today. But look, clinical. I mean, I've got the stats here. 17 Premier League goals for Isak in 24 games. It's taken Salah 26 to get the same amount of goals. It's taken Solanke 32. Ollie Watkins is on 19, but he's played 32. And Haaland is on 20, but he's played 26. So they've all played more games than Alexander Isak, and he's within touch and distance of winning the Golden Boot, which just
is he the most complete striker in the Premier League at the moment?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I don't think many people would put him above Haaland because of, there's one thing Haaland isn't, and that's unclinical. He does finish his chances. But I think when we're talking about an all-round player who can do it all, he offers so much more than Haaland. Off the ball, he's much better at picking the ball up deep off the ball, presser than Haaland. He's better than Watkins, he's better than Solanke. I think he's the most complete player, and I think Bruno and Botman are very, very important to this Newcastle team, and people won't want to sell them. But I think if you could only keep one of them right now, it's Alexander Isak. I don't think there's another player out there like him, and to replace him, who is there out there that Newcastle could realistically get? I think 63 million is, I can't believe I would ever say this, but it's a steal really for what he's become.
Oh, it's looking like an absolute bargain. And obviously, he came out last week and said he doesn't pay any attention to rumours. But with every goal he scores, Aaron, there's going to be some big teams that come knocking, whether it is a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, or an Arsenal. Are you worried about him this summer leaving Newcastle United, or do you take what he said at face value? He's only interested in the project here at Newcastle United, and of course, getting Europa League football, which is a very real possibility for next season. That can only help Newcastle's case.
Look, there's always, as you say, there's always going to be that concern that a bigger fish is going to come in. But you would like to think he looks very, very settled. He looks like he's enjoying football. He's got a fantastic relationship with a lot of the players around him. Europe's crucial, though, isn't it? If we were sat here 2 weeks ago where it was looking a little bit unlikely that they were even going to get Conference League football, I think I'd be a lot more worried. I think Europa League, I think even Conference League is probably enough to keep a very, very good chunk of this group beyond the summer. And I think Newcastle United are not going to be in any hurry to sell any of them, never mind Isak. So yeah, I think hopefully we'll get a good few years out of them yet.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Just going to go back to that Bruno assist for the third goal. I mean, Bruno had 5 out of 7 long balls, so that the accuracy there, 5 out of 7. So it was a clear tactic, wasn't it, of Eddie Howe's to get Newcastle to absorb the pressure. And soon as they get the ball, because of the way he's got Anderson and Murphy dropping into a 5, and that leaves the Spurs fullbacks pushing up, and then you've got Gordon and Barnes just ahead of them, and then Isak splitting 2 centre-backs. The idea was clearly get the ball and either give it to the flanks or hit it long. We saw several different versions of that on Saturday, but that was the clear tactic, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, look, we saw something very similar at Wolves when they won 3-0, but had less possession. We saw Fabian Schär. Every time they regained the ball inside the box, it was Schär over the top. And there was 3 or 4 instances on Saturday where Bruno won the ball pretty much on Newcastle's penalty area, on the D. And he's clearly been listening to the podcast because there wasn't as much tippy-tappy with it. There was just get it out your feet, get it over the top. We saw it a couple of times, and obviously it ended up with being with 2 goals out of the 4. So another very, very good performance from him. And I know I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but he's done it. 11 consecutive games with no yellow cards. We can finally stop bringing it up as a positive when Newcastle get beat. But there was a very, very late scare. I thought he was going to get booked after the whistle, which would have summed up Newcastle's season if that had happened. But look, it's an absolute minor miracle that he's managed to get 11 games, no yellow card, given his track record, given that he had 9 in mid-January. But credit to him, it's a fantastic achievement.
Well, I love the fact that Eddie Howe told TNT Sports after the game that they had a little conversation and said, Bruno, you can't get booked. We need you to importance. And he said, oh, don't worry, Gaffer, I'll not get booked. And Eddie Howe just kind of shook his head because the whole reason he was having that conversation was because he'd been booked too many times and was one booking away from getting a 2-match ban. But look, if anyone had asked me at the start of this run, in the start of the 11 games, will Bruno manage to get all the way through without picking and booking up? I would have laughed out of Tyneside. I would not have believed you. I'd have said he would get him booked within the first game, and he didn't, and he hasn't. And we've spoken about loads over the last few weeks, but he's become such a better player because of it, because he's had to be focused. He's had to have concentrated more on the football and not do the daft things, whether it be jumping in the crowd or letting his mouth run. And there was an incident in the game, Lo Celso, where Dan Burn thankfully stood in front of Bruno because you feared a yellow card there. And I just wonder now what we're going to get from Bruno now this is gone. Are we going to see the Bruno of old? Because as much as fun as it was watching him be very passionate and winding the opposition up, it was also a detriment because you then do build up the yellow cards. You leave yourself risky. Usually there were very early yellow cards in games as well. I don't want to see it. I want to see him be as focused and as driven as he has been in these last 11 games, where I want him to play like he's avoiding that ban every single week. That's what I want to see from him.
I think in an ideal, we'd all want to see that. And look, I don't think his game has been impacted negatively at all. He's actually been fantastic the last 11 games. He's been amazing. But I think we all know what's going to happen, and that is 2 minutes into the next game, Bruno's going to get booked, or it's going to be a straight red, or it's going to be something, because that's just the way Newcastle's season's gone. But Eddie Howe told the same story to us that he told on TNT, and his exact words were, Bruno promised me that he wouldn't get booked, and I didn't believe a word of it. And I think, fair play to Bruno for proving him wrong.
We all owe Bruno apologies. So Bruno, if you're watching, I do apologise. I should have had faith in you from the word go. We're both working from home, me and Aaron. We should have had them giant party poppers that we were talking about. We could have set them off without Steve, the general manager, getting a little bit angry and concerned about us setting the smoke alarms off. Although I bet Harvest probably wouldn't have liked the bang that was going to go with the party poppers. But yes, the 4th goal, Aaron, Fabian Schär, another header from him, another goal from him. And we've asked this question plenty of times. And I actually now think there is only one answer to this. Is Fabian Schär the greatest ever bargain Newcastle United have signed?
Well, Rob Lee might have something to say about it, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. And he's been absolutely fantastic this season, and he's needed to be. He's probably the only player that hasn't actually, succumbed to injury, and it's an absolute miracle because, he's the one who throws himself into more tackles than anyone. Fantastic again Saturday, absolutely solid as a rock at the back. He's really stepped up his game the last couple of weeks, and 50 career goals on Saturday, which I think somebody's pointed out is more than Gabby Jesus. I don't know if that's correct, so don't come at me if you're wrong. But 50 goals for a centre back is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, look, just another fantastic performance from him, and he's definitely a contender for 1 for Player of the Season, but 2 best ever pound for pound signing.
And does he still start next season as first choice? Now, obviously, we've got injuries to Lascelles and Botman, and maybe the answer would be a little bit different if Botman was fit. but we still think Newcastle are going to go out and try and sign a top quality centre back. So, what does the future hold for Fabian Schär? Is this one final burst, one final season going out with a bang, or is he going to be first choice next season?
Well, I think he probably has to be first choice next season unless Newcastle go out and sign 2 new centre backs in the summer, because there's a very high likelihood that we won't see either Botman or Lascelles until 2025. But look, even so, I think Fabian Schär still more than good enough to start for Newcastle United. I'd be very surprised if we suddenly see him dropping like a stone in the pecking order, or we see him shipped out. So I think what Fabian Schär will probably want this summer is maybe a little bit of backup brought in, maybe someone that can rotate with him so that he doesn't have to, get strapped up every week and play through the pain, because, he's played pretty much every minute in the league this season. But he's taken some more wounds, more than most. So hopefully they'll get a few players in, they can rotate, but there's still life in his Newcastle career, and I wouldn't be surprised or upset if he was Newcastle's first choice next season.
Wireman says he can play until he's 35. Surely says he's our best all-round defender. Jake says, I haven't seen any of the Eddie, I can't say it. It's a tongue twister, that one. I haven't seen any of the Eddie Howe out bandwagon for a while. V says it's just another example of how committed these players are to the manager and club. Brian says, will Bruno get booked against Crystal Palace? I'm betting in my bottom dollar that he does. V also says, yeah, as Aaron mentioned, Bruno promised that he wouldn't get booked. Gary says, we've got to get the mindset right. We are on our way to become one of the big teams. Only thing slowing us down is the PSR. Isak is young, still not at his peak. He's here for the project, as he said. Lots of positivity in the comments. Baz Down Under says, I agree, Aaron. Gordon, the best of the season. And a lot of people saying Isak, absolutely brilliant. Some big fans in the comments of Alexander Isak. Quick look at the league table. Aaron up to 6th, ahead of Manchester United on goal difference. I think they're going to finish ahead of Manchester United, I have to be honest. And if you're a fan of the Get in the Bin episodes that we do with Sam Mulner, listen to tomorrow's episode, because I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler now. It was the media loving of Manchester United against 5 subs, and it just turned into half an hour of me and Sam ranting about Manchester United. And this was before they drew luckily 2-2 with Bournemouth. So tune into that one, because Man United are god awful. And if Newcastle United don't finish above them, despite everything Newcastle United have been through, I'll be very surprised.
I think that's the perfect way to sell the podcast before it goes out. Come and listen to us just have a half an hour slagging off of Manchester United, and that'll probably
be beautiful. It was therapeutic. I felt cleansed after.
The most listened to podcast ever, probably, if you sell it like that. Look, I think in the Premier League, Newcastle have never finished above Manchester United, but I think if they're going to do it, then this season is the season to do it, because you've got Newcastle, who have absolutely transformed themselves in the last 4 games, picked up 10 points, and you've got Manchester United, who, just look so poor, and all of a sudden look like, they've got a manager on the brink a little bit. Erik ten Hag, who could do no wrong next season. They're now 4 games without a win in the Premier League. Obviously crashed out the Champions League at the same stage as Newcastle. The FA Cup might be their crown and glory. So definitely a chance. I think we both agree that the Champions League, even with the 5th spot, is out of the question unless Newcastle string together another 5 or 6 wins from 6. But they've definitely got a chance to do it. It looks like 2 teams going in the opposite direction at the minute.
I wonder with Manchester United, they look like a team. Well, they don't look like a team. They look like a group of individuals. The manager, they actually look like a group of players who probably think the manager's out come the summer. That's he's on his way out, and it maybe just goes back to when Eddie Howe was appointed, and maybe when you do have a big money takeover. I know Manchester United haven't strictly been taken over, but Sir Jim Ratcliffe's coming in with big influence. We're seeing that with the chase of Dan Ashworth and Jason Wilcox and other appointments. That maybe you do need your own man in, and Ten Hag's maybe fallen victim of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, some people might say Manchester United are struggling. Will Dan Ashworth, change his tune and maybe think the grass isn't greener? But I actually think it probably adds weight to the fact Ashworth will be relishing the chance to go to Old Trafford with his own plan, with his own man. And a new manager, a fresh start, see what they can do. But look, in terms of the context of this season, Newcastle have obviously still got to play Manchester United, which will be a huge game. So yeah, all to play for.
And I'm going to talk to you about transfers in just a moment, but I also want to talk about Newcastle United women beating Huddersfield 10-0 and being crowned champions, securing promotion from the National League North. Absolutely brilliant. What an achievement. Back-to-back promotions. And they thoroughly deserve all the accolades that's coming their way. What a brilliant season for Becky Langley and her squad.
Yeah, look, I don't think it can be underestimated how, impressive 2 back-to-back promotions is in this stage of the journey. Obviously, a whole new ball game next season, going into the second tier of English football, where they're going to be up against some teams that have got a lot bigger budgets. But they're on onwards and upwards, and I think it was fantastic to see them win the league with such a impressive 10-0 win yesterday. Great to see Staveley and Gudusi there getting involved with the champagne being sprayed at the end. And look, I think credit to Becky Langley as well, because they missed out on promotion when Newcastle first started out, and there was a lot of pressure on her to get it right, because I think if they hadn't got it right the second time, I don't think there would have been unfortunately too much patience with that system. But she's done fantastically well. They've done fantastically well with the players they've brought in, and look, it's fantastic to see that they're sticking to their promise of making it to the WSL slowly but surely.
Yeah, great to see Amanda Staveley following through on her promises with actions, with budget being spent on players, bringing in some great players, but also some fantastic players who were there pre the takeover, having the opportunity to go along on this journey, which is absolutely brilliant. So congratulations to Newcastle United women on their promotion and championship winning season to the second tier of English football. Just transfer wise, I've seen a few people mentioning Mateus Cunha from Wolves. He scored a fantastic double against Nottingham Forest over the weekends. 24 years of age. I mean, he did cost Wolves a pretty penny, but I've been very impressed with him this season. I think he would be a fantastic addition to the Newcastle United squad. What about yourself?
Yeah, he was absolutely brilliant in La Liga, and I think it's no surprise that Wolves have obviously spent a lot of money on him. He's coming to his own eventually in the Premier League. Very good player. I think he would cost you a lot of money, and I also think another couple of Wolves players would cost you a lot of money, but I think I'd equally take them, and that's Pedro Neto, who isn't going to be short of suitors, but also Huang, I think, is an absolutely fantastic player, very versatile. So if Wolves find themselves in any FFP trouble, I think Newcastle could maybe stick a few deals over the line. Fantastic players, and they've done very well under Gary O'Neill this season in some testing conditions.
And just sticking with that game against Forest, another man who always jumps out is Morgan Gibbs-White. Another goal for him. He shows that kind of nasty streak about him as well, which would fit in very well here at Newcastle. And obviously heavily linked with a move in January when it transpired that Newcastle didn't actually have any dollar at all to spend. But he would be another one who would cost a lot of money, but maybe Newcastle could take advantage of Nottingham Forest's off the field issues. But he again would be a fantastic addition to this squad.
Yeah, he looks really good, doesn't he? He looks like a player who would really fit into an Eddie Howe system. Very versatile, good in front of goal. I think the only sticking point might be how much Forest are asking for him.
I mean, in terms of Newcastle in the summer, I mean, is there a player, Aaron, that you would begrudgingly let go, and leave if it meant reinvestment into the squad? Are you looking at someone leaving who doesn't maybe necessarily impact Newcastle all that much? Yes, there might be a first-team player, but they're not like a Bruno or Isak who, if they leave, it's going to cost you nearly as much to replace them, and they're so important. Or are you looking at maybe someone who is that important, saying if we can get 200 million for them, which is obviously a big amount of money, and we can reinvest that, then maybe that's the hit you've got to take to progress Newcastle in the seasons to come?
Yeah, look, I think in an ideal world, and I would like Newcastle to be able to keep that sort of top bracket of players. And when I say that, I mean sort of Bruno, Isak, Botman, Gordon. I think for those, they would be non-negotiable for me. Obviously, Newcastle are sort of tied a little bit with release clauses, and you wouldn't be totally surprised if somebody did come in and try and swoop Bruno for the fee that's obviously in his contract. I think then you maybe drop down, and I think you look at players who are still playing now, but would you be too against it if they go? And I think that brings you on to players like Miggy Almiron. Would too many people say no to 20-30 million for him? It's difficult, isn't it? I think what Newcastle, and obviously this is all dependent on how much they can spend with the new rules which are coming in to replace PSR. But I think if Newcastle can keep the bulk of that main squad together, get rid of some of the deadwood, get some players off the books, free up some wages and two space in the squad, they don't actually need a lot, I don't think, to really kick on. It feels like they do, but actually when you welcome back Joelinton, Tonali and Botman and all these players who have missed the majority of the season, that squad on paper is good enough. They just need a couple of tweaks in a couple of places, but hopefully they can keep hold of the key, the big names.
Centre back, maybe versatile defender across the back four in general.
Not a third striker.
Yeah, third striker's up there, but my opinion on that. I'm sick of sounding like a broken record. But we were talking there about Morgan Gibbs-White, and someone has made an interesting point in saying actually the midfield looks stacked. So do we really need another midfielder to come in?
No, I think midfield is probably the position that they need, to strengthen the least in. I think, especially when you look at the likes of Lewis Miley and Elliot Anderson, I think if you're adding any more players into those positions, you're stunting their growth. So I think you're bang on with a new centre back, or at least you're probably thinking maybe two centre backs, a left back wouldn't go amiss, and an attacker, maybe a right midfielder.
Billy, who's on holiday yet again in sunny Spain, says, I don't think Eddie Howe needs a vast amount of new blood in the transfer window, just to strengthen in a couple of vital areas. Niall says a new number one goalkeeper would be his choice, plus a centre-half and a striker as well. Again, Solanke is another one who scored it over the weekend. A fantastic finish, actually, against Manchester United, who is always creeping up. I would take Solanke as well. And a lot of people, big fans of Morgan Gibbs-White, and a few people a fan of Kuna. Gary saying Wilson will go this summer, I reckon, so we will need a new strike. I do think Miguel Almiron will probably end up leaving as well, and I've come to terms with that. The fan club will be closing down, but if they get someone in like Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm sure we could set it up under a new name. Just before we get to the trivia, Aaron, you mentioned Big Joe there, new 4-year deal. Absolutely brilliant, and it speaks volumes about this club now, doesn't it? It shows you that not only do Newcastle United want to keep their best players, they can keep their best players. They've sold something to Joelinton, and that's persuaded him to stop. They've matched some way his demands. They haven't matched his out-and-out demands, but they've given him a pay rise, put him on the bracket with the other big earners at the club, so they're showing that they can reward hard work, reward success, which will show the other players currently in the squad. If you work hard and you make Newcastle United success, there is a little wage increase for you down the line when you deserve it. And also to potential suitors, it says to them, look, you're going to be playing with some of the best players in the Premier League here. They want to stop here. You should want to sign here. And I think, honestly, this is about much more than Joelinton signing a new deal.
Yeah, it's huge for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm not sure I could have stomached Joelinton playing for another Premier League club. I think it would have been too painful. And look, we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago when the debate started to rear its head. There's an argument, and I think some fans would agree that he's maybe would be a bigger loss than than Bruno for what he gives you. But look, you're absolutely right. It's a sign that they're keeping big players and tying them down to big deals. That players are obviously coming and getting hefty pay rises, which is what Joelinton's obviously done and what he's been asking for. It's massive in terms of keeping Bruno, because obviously Bruno's incentive to stay would have massively decreased had his best pal moved on to Pastors New. So, and ultimately, he's one of Newcastle's most important performers. They've missed him to no end this season. So the fact that we get hopefully another 4 years of him is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and it was a lovely rendition of Joelinton's song, which I won't repeat because we did enough swearing in last week's episode. But it was a lovely rendition of a song around the Gallagher and all the corners of the stand on Saturday. And he was there, he was watching the game, and he would have enjoyed that. And I also think it's a massive for Eddie Howe as well, because make no bones about it, Eddie Howe put this as his priority. He wanted Joelinton to stop at the club, and the owners, the board, have backed Eddie Howe. And in many ways, this is bigger than any signing that you're going to have an outlay for it in the summer. Because I think had you gone in the summer and Joelinton had to be sold, I do wonder if that starts the first little cracks of the relationship and what have you, because you've let your manager down essentially. He's made no bones about what he wants to do with Joelinton, but instead, what's actually happened is massively positive. They're backing Eddie Howe. They've given him what he wants, and that is keeping Joelinton at Newcastle United.
Yeah, Eddie Howe made it clear to those at the top that he wanted to keep Joelinton, and there was no sort of ifs and buts about it. Amanda Stavey has obviously had a big role in that. Steve Nixon's had a big role of that as well, given that Dan Ashworth's gone. Good to see that they're getting these deals over the line and they've still got that pull of being able to keep their big players, even after a season such as this one. Yeah, just really, really positive news.
We've got Lousy saying, controversial view, but if we want to evolve to a team who's got more possession, do you think Big Joe's got what it takes?
Sorry, I was just busy reading the comment under that saying that you need to wear a camel coat next week to complete the John Motson look. And that's because to anybody who's listening to this podcast, not watching it on YouTube, Andrew was sat there holding a mic as if he's in the St James's Park commentary booth.
I'd love to have that job. Do you know what? Because I'm down south visiting family. I'm in a lovely rocking chair as well. But for the people not watching, it's very relaxing this. But yes, and maybe I will get the good old camel coat out for next week. But on Joelinton, on Lousy's view, I'll reread it. The point, controversial view. But if we want to evolve the team to a more possession-based style, do we think Big Joe's got what it takes? I will say yes, without a shadow of a doubt. We've seen him on the ball. He drives Newcastle forward. He's very good at carrying the ball into the opposition half. So without a shadow of a doubt, I think he's got what it takes if Newcastle do manage to become a more possession-based side.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, Newcastle have enjoyed lots of lengthy spells where they've actually enjoyed more of the ball than their opposition under Howe in the last 2 seasons. And Joelinton's never really looked out of place. To coin a phrase sums it up here, for many, Big Joe's the first name on the team sheet. I think a lot of people would be agreeing with that.
And David Cook says he doesn't usually catch the lives, so thank you for popping into this one, David. But he says he finally had success in the ballot and he was at the game on Saturday. So not a bad first game to make it to this season. And where man says we've missed Big Joe. Finally, just before the trivia, bit of a discussion in the comments, Aaron. If it was between Tossan from Fulham on a free or Lloyd Kelly from Bournemouth on a free, who are you picking? You can't say Nathan Ake.
No, Tossan for me. Lloyd Kelly looks a very, very good player. I was watching the Bournemouth Man United game the other night and he looked very good, but Tossan would be a fantastic sign. The fact that he's even available on a free is quite baffling. I know Fulham have tried to keep him and he wants a bigger move and I think he's ready for it. Came through Manchester City's academy before leaving for first team football. He looks fantastic. Great with his feet, really towering presence. It would be a fantastic free transfer if they can get him over the line.
Jake says Big Joe should be feature captain, and Wireman says Tossan all day long. Right, are we ready for the trivia? This is a brilliant bit of trivia, if I do say so myself. Although Aaron says every time I say that, it turns out not to be.
You jinx it every time you say it's good, so I'm now a bit worried, but we'll give it a go.
This is going to be clear and concise, okay? What I want you to do is name the Newcastle United player with the most appearances from every EU country. Okay. So do you know your EU countries? Do you want me to read the EU countries out, and then you go for the player? Would that make it easier?
That would make it easier. Yeah.
Right. I will read you.
Is this of all time or is this Premier League era?
This is all time.
There better not be some 1970s appearance holders here.
The majority are Premier League esque era. Now there are some EU countries like Bulgaria, Croatia, Estonia, Latvia, Poland that we haven't had players from, so they're obviously out of the list. The rest of them though have. Is it the 28th? Were we the 29th or was it 28th? Anyway, I think there's 27 and we went out. But yes, quite a few countries to get through. So we'll start with Austria.
Oh, okay. Austria. You've given us
he was a man who was on a loan. He was versatile. He could play wing back. He could play midfield. He has played in Germany. He's played in Austria. His initials. I'll give you his initials because I'm feeling kind. VL.
Well, I was just about to say the only Austrian that I can actually think that played for Newcastle was Lazaro, but he can't be the record holder. But
Yeah,
I'm guessing, yeah, okay, good
I think it's
start.
15 games. Belgium.
Philip Albert.
Yeah, and then we go down to Cyprus.
Um,
It's a name I'm never going to be able to pronounce. We did have an interview via our colleague Kieran Kelly with him not too long ago. It would have been 18 months ago or so. Those of the early 90s will remember this fella. So that's before
no,
you were born, Aaron.
no, I'm not going to get it.
It was Papa Vasily. Papa Vasily? Someone will pronounce that right in when they say it. But yes, I think people know who I mean.
Kind of phrase got it in the comments, to be fair.
Nicodemus Palavasius. Czech Republic, no longer with us, unfortunately.
Pav.
Yeah. Denmark.
Um,
The first name of this footballer, I'm pretty sure, has the same first name as someone in ABBA. So if you know your ABBA,
Bjorn someone.
yes, Bjorn Christensen. Then you go down to Finland. You skip over Estonia and you head into Finland. A man who dived like a salmon.
I was just about to say, again, like Lazaro, there's no way this guy could be the record holder, but Shefty.
Yeah. In fact, I probably think he's probably the only Finnish player.
Well, yeah, I think they've probably won this by default, Lazaro and Cucci, because there can't be many that have been with them. But okay, Shefty.
Then you're on to France.
Well,
this is one nation where Newcastle have had a lot of French players.
Well, this is what I mean. So before you say yes or no, my head says it's got to be Laurent Robert, but then Moussa Sissoko was here for a long time. No, I'm gonna go Robert.
It's Laurent Robert. It's the first one you've got, or second one you've got right without a clue, but it is Laurent Robert. Yep, yeah. He's the French player. Germany.
Oh, there hasn't been too many Germans, and it's certainly not going to be Loris Karius. So, I will go for Didi Hamann.
That's right. I think there's probably only been 2 Germans.
Yeah, I was going to say he was the first one that came to mind. Again, he probably didn't play that long, but
he played one season, didn't he, before he went off to Liverpool? Fantastic player. But yeah, Dieter Hamann is the German player. Then over to Greece. You're not getting a clue for this one.
It's got to be Dabizas.
It is Nikos Dabizas. Hungary. This is a man who's kind of in the school of Tavernier in Rangers, and it's kind of a man who, what might have been, he hasn't reached the heights of Tavernier, admittedly, but he was one of those held in that kind of generation of players where Newcastle really thought they wanted something. He has played for Hungary in, I don't know, in major competitions, but he's definitely had international caps. Defender.
Oh, Thomas Kadar.
That's the one. And then you got the Republic of Ireland. No clue for this one.
Big Shea.
Yeah. And then you've got Italy.
Again, I think like Germany, I don't think we've had too many Italian players in the years, but I think he was here a couple of seasons, wasn't he? David Santon.
David Santon it is, and there's a lot of people in the comments doing really well. A lot of people are getting Hamann and Kadar. A lot of people said John Dahl Thompson for Denmark, but it wasn't. It was Boyne Christensen. We haven't had anyone from Latvia. We haven't had anyone from Lithuania or Malta. I feel like I could be doing the Eurovision results. It's the only bit I like about the Eurovision. The missus loves all the songs and stuff, and we go to parties and what have you. But I just like I like the results. Me, I like.
Well, to be fair, I do like the totally obscure mental songs, but the best part of the night has to be seeing who gets the nil point.
I like the geopolitics of it all, because you know exactly who's going to vote for each other.
And actually, looking at you now with your mic stood there and your headset, live from Stratford upon Avon or wherever you are, you could be hosting it. Really,
I could. Hello London, brilliant. Right, yeah, no one from Latvia, Lithuania, and Malta. We're on to the Netherlands now.
The Netherlands it's got to be Tim Krul.
Said with an air of confidence, and you would be right. No one from Poland. We're then on to Portugal. Again, not many. There's not many.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be many, but The only one that really comes to mind would be Hugo Viana.
In fact, I think he might be the only one, if I'm not mistaken. But you're right, Hugo Viana. No one from Romania. We then have got Slovenia.
Well, I nearly said this guy for Hungary until he said defender, and I think I would have been wrong anyway because I think he's Slovenian, and that would be Haris Vukic.
Yep, another one in the same school there because he was in
Yeah,
that
that was
generation
why I was.
alongside Tavernienko there. So
Yeah.
Haris Fikic. And then you have Slovakia.
Martin Dubravka.
Yeah. Then you have Sweden as the final one. And this threw me slightly, actually. If I
Well,
hadn't been checking the answers out, I wouldn't have gone for this. If it was reversed, I wouldn't have gone for this man.
I think my heart wants to say Alexander Isak, but I think it's Emil Kraft.
It is Emil Kraft. So there
Yeah.
you have it, ladies and gents. The Newcastle United players with the most appearances for the club from each of the EU countries, minus obviously the countries that we've never had representatives from. This has been the Monday Show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Leave us a rating and review if you listen on our audio channel. We do appreciate the support as always. Share the pod amongst your Newcastle United support and friends and family. If you're on the YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up. Hit subscribe on the channel again. Go on, share this out on social media. Do it right now. Help us out. Again, we really do appreciate it. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. We hope you guys have enjoyed the show. Me and Aaron certainly have. And we'll see you guys next week.